Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. To get started off here, I want to introduce the attorneys here, and we'll start with Chase Brockstedt. You can take it away, Chase.
Thank you, Ed. Good afternoon. My name is Chase Brockstedt, and my firm, Barrett Mandalis Brockstedt, based here in Delaware, is co-lead counsel in this important case. Thank you for joining us today. Seated at the table is my partner, Steve Spence, to my right, and to my left is my co-counsel, Philip Federico, and his partner, Brent Series, of the firm Shakur Federico in State. We are here today because the people of Millsboro, Delaware, refused to be silenced and fought for their community, their health, and their quality of life. It is an honor to have worked with my fellow Delaware citizens to make our state safer and a better home for many. It is vital we all take a role in protecting our environment, and this case is a perfect example of how a small group of people can affect real change. We're going to take a few minutes and go through a handful of slides this afternoon, and then after that we will have a question and answer session and then hear from a few of the Millsboro residents and our clients. This case started with one local resident who decided enough was enough. In 2017, Millsboro resident Gary Couples and his wife Anne Marie were hospitalized with serious GI issues. Later that year in early December, he unexpectedly received cases of bottled water delivered to his front porch. The note said the water was from Mountaire, and he was instructed not to drink the water from his faucet and instead use the bottled water. Gary called our law firm. Our firm, along with Shakur Federico and Staten, began investigating the case. The purpose of the investigation was to understand what was in the couple's drinking water and where it came from. This led us to the doorstep of Mountaire Farms of Millsboro, Delaware, and their poultry processing plant, located about a mile from the couple's home. Mountaire is the 6th largest chicken company in the country, with headquarters in Little Rock, Arkansas. Our team investigated this case by reviewing millions of pages of documents that outlined the corporation's conduct. We tested the wells of over 200 Millsboro residents, spoke to these residents at town hall meetings, submitted FOIA requests, and interviewed former Mountaire employees about the plant's practices. Our team included 11 lawyers, over 24 experts, and 2 consultants to take on Mountaire. We included hydrogeologists, environmental engineers, experts in spray irrigation, sludge, and air emissions on our expert team. And our findings were stunning and tragic. Mr. Couples had the courage to speak out, and this kicked off a series of events that led to a landmark $205 million resolution for the people of Millsboro that was approved today by the court. Phil?
Yes. Good afternoon. I think I would take a minute at this point to talk a little bit about the law that applies to the chicken processing industry, and in particular, the laws that apply to Mountaire regarding their chicken processing plant in Millsboro. We have federal laws and we have state laws that govern how waste is to be dealt with through the chicken processing exercise. And this is not a cartoon, but it's an illustration of really what's involved here. On a state level, you get permits here in Delaware from DNREC. On a federal level, the laws are governed by the EPA. But basically what we're talking about is a chicken comes into this plant from the hatchery, off the truck, and the goal is to get it out of the plant. And believe it or not, it takes 5 gallons of clean water to do that for just one chicken. And Mountaire was producing 2 million gallons of not clean water, but wastewater on a daily basis. So this wastewater comes out and it's got to be dealt with in some fashion. That's a lot of dirty water to get rid of. So I want to next talk about really what happens from there. What happens from there is the water goes to a treatment plant. It's called a wastewater treatment plant. Now, Mountaire bought this facility in the year 2000 from a company called Townsend. And Townsend was doing its best, but struggling to comply with its permits and the environmental standards. As a result of buying the plant, Mountaire did their due diligence to see what the plant was, what kind of shape it was in. And it was very clear that the plant in 2000 was barely capable of doing a million gallons of wastewater a day. Mountaire comes in 2000, buys the plant, puts essentially no money into plant upgrades, but doubles capacity. Well, it's not surprising that in 2017, this plant actually failed. It collapsed under its own weight. They could not, at the wastewater treatment plant, get rid of the nitrogen that was in this wastewater, because that is the offending chemical or toxin we're talking about here. It's nitrogen that's in the wastewater that, after it's sprayed onto the fields, converts into nitrates. So we have this catastrophic failure in 2017, and a big part of it was not only was the water dirty, but the storage for the facility was inadequate. Industry standard is 60 to 90 days. Here, they only had 7 days worth of storage. They did not build more lagoons. The other thing that's important to point out is the federal drinking water standard, which, by the way, was created in the 1970s, is 10 milligrams per liter of nitrate in the water. It's got to be less than that. Mountaire, on average, was discharging between 20 and 100 milligrams per liter, as much as 3 times the federal standard we found in our clients' wells. It's very disturbing. This really led us, frankly, to continue, with this litigation, because we knew it was really time for some truth, some transparency, and some accountability. One other thing we found that was very upsetting was that there was hydrogen sulfide being emitted in the air. And hydrogen sulfide, just like nitrogen, can cause significant illness to people in the Millsboro area. And so we had on one hand, we had a nitrogen toxicity or nitrate toxicity problem that was causing physical problems to many people, problems like cancer, problems like gastrointestinal problems. People actually died. And we were having problems with hydrogen sulfide, smells like rotten eggs, ingestion, which likewise was causing health problems. Not only were we having people suffer the physical effects and health effects, but the property values were plummeting in the area. So clearly it was time for us to do something.
And so during our investigation, we're learning that people are really suffering in this community. We met with folks at town halls, and we found out that the Millsboro community was really being harmed by the operations here. At the same time, we learned that the Delaware Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control was negotiating behind closed doors with Mountaire to enter into something that is called a consent decree. And for us, it was basically an agreement between DENREC and Mountaire to fix the problems at the plant. The problem was that it was basically a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. And so we intervened into that case and prevented the court from entering a consent decree that would not have helped the residents of Millsboro and would not have ended the contamination. At the same time that we intervened in the federal court DENREC v. Mountaire case, we also initiated our own state court action, which is called a class action complaint in the Superior Court of the state of Delaware. And what that sought was a fund of money to compensate area residents for their property damage, the diminution of their property value, as well as their personal injuries, the health effects that Phil spoke about. And so we were really litigating this case on 2 fronts. And we had the federal court intervention that was happening at the same time that we had the class action complaint. The strategy in the federal court was for DENREC and Mountaire to find any court that they could to bless their consent decree and have it entered as an order. In the state court, the legal strategy was to object, obstruct, and delay. They wanted to withhold information as long as they possibly could, make sure that they did not produce relevant documents that we needed for the investigation. They didn't want to produce witnesses for deposition. But by the late spring of 2020, after nearly 3 years of litigation, the pressure on Mountaire was at an all-time high. By that time, their object, obstruct, delay strategy had backfired. They were ordered to produce millions of pages of documents, produce witnesses for deposition, and were sanctioned by the court for discovery violations. Information was finally starting to flow. At the same time, the primary legal issue in the class action was whether or not the parent company based in Arkansas was subject to jurisdiction in Delaware. Mountaire lost this critical issue, and this was a major victory for us. And despite seeking the entry of the consent decree as an order of the court in June of 2018, nearly 2 years later, at the same time that they were losing on discovery and information was flowing, at the same time they had lost on jurisdiction for the parent corporation, they couldn't get a court anywhere to bless their consent decree. So with jurisdiction over the Arkansas parent, hundreds of smoking guns in the documents that had been produced, favorable testimony, and Mountair's inability to get their decree entered, they came to the table and settlement discussions began.
And they did. They began in earnest. And I credit Mountaire for really corporate responsibility and doing the right thing. They sat down with us and they realized that it was now time to act as a responsible corporate entity consistent with their mission statement of being really stewards to the environment. And so they did the right thing. They sat down with us. We negotiated in the federal court where this consent decree was pending to improve substantially upon the consent decree. And we got a result there where there's $120 million they've committed to spend hard costs, an additional $20 million on operation and maintenance. And that consent decree is being approved by the federal court, signed off on by the federal court. In the state court today, as you heard, Judge Karsnitz approved the $65 million class action settlement for personal injury and property damages. So collectively, we've achieved a $205 million settlement for this class. We're very proud of it, and we know it's going to change lives and protect the environment forever.
Yes, if you want to introduce the clients that are here in attendance, either via Zoom or they're in Delaware.
Absolutely. So we have on the Zoom today, 3 of our clients. I mean, Gary Couples is with us. He was clearly the catalyst for this case. He and his wife, Anne Marie, came home on December 2nd, 2017 and found bottled water left by Mountaire on their front steps. They both had been experiencing severe gastric issues for months and wondered whether it was, being caused by their drinking water. They called our law firm. We also have Joyce Logan and her family. They suffered a series of health issues while living in the affected area for more than a decade. Mountair's actions have dramatically impacted Joyce's life, as her husband, nephew, and dog all passed away within a short period of time from health issues that can be directly attributed to the contaminated water. We also have David Neal and his family. They've lived in the affected area for almost 40 years, and their health has suffered in numerous ways from the contaminated water and the horrific smells emitted by the Mountaire plant. His daughter was pregnant while Mountaire was polluting the air, and she was drinking the water, and now his 4-year-old granddaughter suffers from skin sensitivity issues. So we welcome your questions, and we'll hand things back to you, Ed.
Thank you. And I see Sebastian Malo would like to ask one. Go right ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that to the news today essentially is a $65 million settlement. And on top of that, it adds up to, with the federal consent decree, it adds up to $205 million. But in terms of what happened today, the $65 million settlement was approved, correct?
Also, the consent decree, which governs the $140 million remediation, was entered as an order of the court today as well.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Nick, see you with your hand up. Go right ahead.
How's it going? Nick Sciolino with Delaware Public Media. I know part of the settlement had to do with upgrades to Mountaire's wastewater treatment systems. I haven't taken a look at the DNREC permits that were offered, but I was wondering if anyone here could speak to what the upgrades will do to solve this problem.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest upgrade, and certainly the most important upgrade, remember when I was talking about the federal drinking water standard being 10? Well, the new plant, once the upgrade is complete, is going to be putting out, or should be putting out, a nitrate level, or nitrogen level, I should say, of between 3 and 5. So actually spraying that water on the same fields will dilute the aquifer and improve, what's already in the ground. So I think that is really the biggest and most important. There will no longer be a need for storage, because you can spray 24/7 and you're just improving the situation. Does
Any
does that help, Nick?
Yeah, that does. And I'd also be interested to hear from many of the residents if this is what they were hoping for as far as the settlement.
Sure. Gary, if you can unmute, you can start off.
In terms of the settlement, I think it was probably the best outcome possible. That there's no question about that. But the impact on me as well as my wife continues on. We have continually since 2017 had really severe gastric issues to the point where gastroenterologists really didn't know what to do. I mean, they could tie it back to the water, but as far as treatment, it was whatever was in our gut was in our gut, and it was creating havoc. And when I say havoc, I mean severe diarrhea, cramps. You really couldn't go anywhere. And in the winter of 2018, my wife, who had experienced symptoms similar to mine, but not nearly as drastic, until we actually got to Florida in January, and she ended up with C. diff, which required an antibiotic, vancomycin, which is the strongest antibiotic that you can take. Well, subsequent to that, I end up having to have my gallbladder out because that seemed to be the course of action that was next, and that really didn't help. Matter of fact, here in the last 2 weeks, I've had numerous gastro tests to find out what's really going on. But again, when we came down in November of 2020, in January of 2021, Anne had to go in for an emergency gallbladder removal. And obviously those two issues are connected. So that's the health aspects. We're still struggling with that. We're also struggling with a tremendous loss in terms of our property. We have a waterfront property, and it's beautiful. It was the dream home, if you will, and the situation with Mountaire created an unbelievable issue. Every time you wanted to cook, you have to use bottled water. The bottled water comes in bottles that weigh 50 pounds. I'm 74 years old. I shouldn't, with a heart condition, I had 3 bypasses, 7 stents, and a brand new valve. I shouldn't be lugging stuff like that around, but that's what's necessary. Simple things like ice makers. Can't use the ice out of our ice maker. When you wash your clothes, you're wondering what you're washing your clothes in. And more importantly, when you take a shower or a bath, you're wondering what's in the water. So there's this constant doubt. And in all candor, last year in a discussion with Chase, we told him we didn't want to come back from Florida.
Yeah, you're right, Gary. That is a concern, and it's a concern and a problem we've remedied, because through the $65 million settlement in the state case, as we go through allocation, which is the distribution of the funds, everybody that lives in the groundwater area, like you, will be have funds available to them for a treatment system. And that treatment system will really immediately solve the problem such that any water coming into the house at this point will be substantially free of nitrates until the more permanent solution really comes into being as the plant starts to put out wastewater with a 3 to 5 milligram per liter nitrogen level. So we are going to be able to solve the problem short term and long term. And that was a big part of representing you and everybody else and really taking care of that priority, because it is a priority.
Well, let me just add to that. There's the 10-state standard for water, and that's nitrates is just one of the components. They were exceeding other criteria in that standard, and hopefully that will rectify itself too, because again, as Argasto and it's a difficult word, has told us, there's something in our gut that's creating this issue. And the experts that were hired by you folks indicated that we were the poster child for what was going wrong. And I wasn't going to argue with them.
I see that I think Randall Chase has a question. You want to get to him? You can unmute yourself.
Sure.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
There's been a lot of moving parts in this case. Does this resolve all litigation in all states, in all courts?
It does.
Okay. Did anything in the first amended consent decree change as a result of your objections?
We obviously, the case originated with the consent decree, which Chase talked about earlier, and which, in the opinion of our experts, was.
Could you speak up a little? We're having a hard time.
I'm a little further away from the microphone.
Take your mask.
Sure. In Chase's initial comments, he referenced the initial consent decree. There were substantial changes, of course, made between the original consent decree and the first amended consent decree, which are attributable to our work throughout the case and the work of our experts. From the entry of the first decree till today, there are some additional negotiated components to what Mountaire will be doing going forward. That includes some additional phytoremediation, which will have the impact of pulling some of the nitrate out of the groundwater today. It also includes a system by which residents can report concerns about air quality and odor to Mountaire and receive a timely response to those concerns. It also includes certain provisions in terms of their disposal of sludge going forward. They're not going to do it until the plant comes back online. So a number of things that have been negotiated since that point.
Were those differences between the original decree and the amended decree, or is there going to be, are those differences since the first amended decree was proposed?
Additions since the first amended consent decree. So they're not included within the first amended consent decree, but they're a separate agreement that Mountaire has agreed to follow going forward.
And has DNREC signed off on that?
DNREC is not a party to those agreements, but I'm sure they don't object to it. But there are additional promises by Mountaire based upon our litigation.
Thank you.
I believe Ryan had another question. Ryan?
Yeah, this one was actually for Gary, and I was just kind of curious, given how this all kind of started, what did you think when you found a note from Mountaire and a pallet of water on your doorstep after the health issues you were having?
Unmute yourself, Gary.
You're on mute, Gary.
Unmute.
There you go.
There's an interesting story. We were up in Millsboro at a local restaurant and came home and it was dark. So I went to walk into our back door and I tripped over the damn things. And I wonder what the heck's going on here. So there's these 2 cases of bottled water and an envelope with a letter in it that says that the water was from my friends at Mountaire and Culligan Sharp Water, and instructing us that we were to use that water for drinking. And first off, I don't even have any friends at Mountaire or Culligan Water. And it was a Friday evening, so you sort of struggled over the weekend, wondering what the hell was going on. And Monday morning, I was on the phone with Denrek, and fortunately, I owned an engineering company in Rehoboth Beach, so I knew who to talk to. And they basically informed me that there was an issue with Mountaire and the groundwater, and that it was polluted to the point where you couldn't drink it. Well, that lit the fuse. I was just berserk about that, because our house was a dream house. It's on the water. We have a long bulkhead, and all of a sudden, that one of the key components of living anywhere was taken away from us in terms of the water. And to have a place to live, you need water, you need a place to dispose of sewage, and you need access. Well, we had 2 of them, but the water didn't have that. And so I contacted Glenn Mandelis of Baird Mandelis and Brockstead. We were in their office December 6th and signed an agreement for them to represent us. And I guess we were the first ones in.
I'd like to give Joyce Logan and David Neal also a chance to give their views on things. Joyce, would you like to share some thoughts on this?
You're off mute. Okay. Hello, everybody. First of all, I want to let you know that I'm borderline with Mountaire, and they've done a lot of damage. Okay, but I'm just going to let you know a few things that I've come up with that I am very, very disgusted with Mountaire. I feel that Mountaire has impacted my life, as well as the other residents in this area, which I consider a gross negligence on their part. I further feel that this environmental oversight helped to contribute, which I'm totally upset about. After hearing you, my husband's cancer, my dog's illness at the same time, my nephew's stomach conditions, and in the 4 years span, I lost all 4 of them, all 3 of them. And that's very upsetting to me. And I myself have developed a serious problem with sinus infection. Like I said, we're joining, and to know that all those chemicals from Mountaire came into my life and my family's, it's disturbing. The residents had to deal with sickening smells. I mean, very bad environmental smells. I called once to try to get the environmental people, and they gave me a police officer. Now that's how disturbing I was, like I didn't know the difference from police and environmental. And another thing is that not only that, he's talking about buying water. I buy a lot of water because I've seen somehow to be dehydrating in these years of this mess that's come on. I never dehydrated before. but I dehydrate a lot behind this. And I know that there are other health issues that have come upon me, and I know most likely a lot of others have had these health issues. And fourthly, talking about our property value. I can see that my property, and especially with the land-wise, has been impacted. I can look at that. But you want to talk about a loss. Talk about losing your whole trailer. And so far have paid out of your pocket $50,000. And now going further, I need a deck still on this property. And this deck, because of the prices out here, it's costing me anywhere from $6,800 to $7,800 to get this deck redone. And it's the wood that's on this deck that has deteriorated behind Mountaire sprinkler, 24/7 sprinkler out there. When the roof man went there and took off the boards when I was getting this house done, I had to go all the way down to the beams. I had the gas company put my heater out of commission because of the wetness in that place. The central air, the guy that put in my central air and my heater again, when he went to the chimney to do the work and taking out the chimney, it was nothing but mush up there. The whole front side of my trailer and part of half of my right side of my trailer had to be completely taken out. But I felt that this was the best way for me to go because I had to take care and look out for myself. And the cheapest way not to have to bring, since my trailer wasn't that old, to bring another trailer on site to this property, it was to redo this trailer. And there's something else I'd like to say. Yes, you might say that it was a time for my husband and them to die. But on the other hand, I like to say that one more ounce of clean water and could have not let me have my family back. Just another ounce that they would not have had the intake. And for the many times that we have been sprayed on that property, not only to my trailer, this thing has hit my deck that was 150 feet away from my trailer and has sprayed us all sitting on the deck. I mean, does that make sense? I know they said they had a problem with the sprinkler, but I have to face it. I've been hurt. My property has been damaged. I have lost a lot. I'm trying to maintain. I pulled from my little bit of savings because I have nothing else to live off of but the little bit that I had. And another thing, for the people that came forward with this, let me say I'm very thankful for you coming forward. And I'd like to say to our lawyers and their teams, thanks for exposing, whether it be Mountaire or anybody else who chooses to be careless with the lives of humans or animals, that there are dire consequences to pay. And when you choose to neglect and are found out, given that fact that there are 3 senses that you should look at. There are street senses, there are book senses, and there are common senses. And since common sense should have been your way of life and not have impact the people that you did and hurt. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you very much, Joyce. And number one, I just want to thank you for your efforts in coming forward and your willingness to speak today. And Ed, Joyce's comments and Gary's comments from before that, you know, when Gary first contacted our law firm, you know, he was one person who was telling us about the fact that, you know, he couldn't drink his water. And when we started to have town halls, we heard stories just like Joyce's. And we could not believe, you know, what was happening in the community on such a widespread basis. So, I mean, that sort of gives you just a little bit of a flavor of what our team walked into when we had our first town hall meeting with, you know, whatever it was, you know, a couple hundred residents, and the outpouring of emotion and the frustration and the lack of accountability and the lack of enforcement was palpable in the room. And Joyce, thank you very much for telling your story to us back then and for sticking with us and telling your story today.
Yeah,
Thank you for all that you've done for us.
And Ed, what we didn't know on the front end, which is really pretty amazing, is that, you know, while the federal drinking water standard is 10 milligrams, right? And they were permitted at Mountaire to spray 15.6. But since they bought the plant for the last 20 years, they've been averaging somewhere between 20 and 100. One year, I think they were up around 130 milligrams. They haven't been in compliance with their permit since they took over this plant, and they're not in compliance today. But these upgrades that are part of this settlement will get them into compliance. Joyce, thank you again for sharing your story.
I just have one other statement to make. What was surprising to me is that when I came down here and bought this property and I looked at it, yes, I looked at the property, but I didn't look at the water. I sort of did when I got a chance to, and when I did buy it and I did look at the water, it was something that was sort of disturbing to me, because I'm saying this water did not look clear to me. And that's when I saw the mess that was coming in the field next to me, it started me wondering. And the reason why the water did not look clear to me, because I spent 25 years of my life working with New Jersey American Water Company, and having good water coming out, I know the difference that there was something going on here. But I just couldn't put my hand on it at the time, and I couldn't get the environmental people like I wanted. Thank you.
I have a question from Hannah from ABC 47.
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
All right, thank you. So my question is for the impacted residents. You know, we're talking about property values going down. We're talking about serious health concerns, which, you know, unfortunately ended up in death for some. So, you know, looking ahead in the future, does this settlement offer you any kind of peace of mind, or, you know, are you still wary of all of these issues that you've been battling going on 4 years now?
Do we want to give David a chance to talk here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
Me and myself, I don't see it going away anytime soon. I mean, sure, we might be getting a little bit of money out of this thing, but the damage has already been done. They're not going to repair that. My daughter and me have had a lot of issues. My daughter, the worst issues. I mean, she went in the hospital, you know, well, kept going back and forth to the hospital before she had her baby. And she had ulcerative colitis, hyperactive thyroid, high heart rate, had to have her gallbladder taken out. And all this stuff is, well, she's not going to get her gallbladder back. It's one of the filters of the system. But I've got a lot of medical issues too. And my wife has some. We've all had some diarrhea and everything. My wife and my daughter had as it worse. They'll get a pain in their stomach and they got to run. It's not they have to walk, they have to run to the bathroom. And my daughter's constantly in and out the bathroom, having to go. And that's still, this is 4 years later after she had the baby. But we just need something done. I mean, when we first had this problem with the water, I had my daughter, which hadn't been in our house for a while, it came into the house, and she said, "What's wrong with your water? It stinks." I said, "I don't know. No, we've never had any problem with it." And that's when we had it tested, and it come back with high nitrates and everything else. But
Gary, did you also want to say something on this?
As David just said, the problems, it's already, the cow's already out of the barn. And I guess what we're going to have to do is decide what we're going to do with our home. The reality of it is last year we have a home in Florida, and I didn't want to come home, neither did my wife, but we had to. We had business to take care of up there. You know, it's a very difficult situation when you're stuck, basically, and you, as I said before, you don't know what you're taking a shower in, you don't know what you're washing your clothes in, you can't use the ice maker, your gastro issues continue. You know, what's it worth? I don't know. I really and truly don't know. I can hazard a guess, but it's still not going to. You could throw millions and millions of dollars at this, but you're still going to have.
Fortunately, Gary, we do have millions and millions of dollars. Thank goodness. And you're right, both David and Gary. The reason there's a lawsuit is because there's been damage done. In order to have a lawsuit, you need negligence, which causes an injury or damage. So without that, you don't have a lawsuit. Now, what we do when there's a lawsuit like this is we do our best to get you back to where you were before the damage was done. But as David pointed out, we can't bring his daughter's gallbladder back, and we can't give Gary his gallbladder back either. But certainly the amount of money we've recovered is going to permit us to do some things. And the real source of the problem, there are two sources. There's nothing more important to any of us on this earth than clean water and clean air. Without it, this would not be a very good place. So we know that in terms of getting you all clean water, we have ample funds that will go towards putting in water treatment systems in every person's home as promptly as we can make it happen. And that will give you clean water so you don't have to worry moving forward. And then changing the output at the Mountaire water treatment plant and getting that number down to between 3 and 5 milligrams per liter is going to dilute what's in the groundwater. You'll still have your water treatment system, but eventually you'll be able to you won't need it over time. So unfortunately, we can't go back and correct any of the deaths and various medical illnesses and injuries that have befallen people. And Gary and David, you're right, the property values now are not what they should be. But the hope is that once we eliminate this problem in terms of water pollution, air contamination, the property values should continue to go up, and hopefully they'll come back. And in the interim, you're going to be compensated for your diminution of property value. So we've done our best to try and make a bad situation better, and to try and make everybody whole. But as you said, Gary, it's really impossible to put a number on your health. As my father used to say when I was a young man, he used to say to me, "Son, if you have your health, you have everything. The rest of it will take care of itself." So unfortunately, we've done the best we can, and we hope everybody, and we know the court's satisfied, and we hope everybody else is satisfied.
I see that Joyce wants to say something.
Yes, I just want to say this to the other two people that I know are here. I forget your names, but I know one. I think Gary and David. But I just want to say, yes, I understand because I'm hurting too, like you said, about my property values and everything. I have two properties here. I have almost 2 acres of land, and given the age that what I'm going through at 77 years old, it's a lot. But I just want you to understand one thing. I'm going to be with you. I'm going to think in this line, and this is what sort of helps me get through the day. We cannot get the health issues that we've developed all the way back to where we were because we're getting older. But let's look at this. As we go forward, and if Mountaire can make Mountaire clean up their mess, what we might lead to one of our younger kids, or in my case, my niece or nephew, what I might leave to them, or what you might leave to your kids. Let's hope that the future of our families and kids can go farther than we did by having Mountaire to clean up this destructive mess that they have created around this area and any other area that they seek to find. Because like you said, anybody that buys something, they know what they're getting. They know what they have to clean up. And this water that's this little lake that's right behind me, and everything sitting right there on my property, and watching my trailer go down, my man cave go down, and then water hitting my own house. And this 2,500 square foot house is a little love nest for me. I'm retired, but I don't have a lot to live off. I go by the grace of God, and the thanks for the grace of God is what carries me through from day to day. And just hoping that they carry you and everybody else too, but look at our families and the people down the road. We may not benefit it all the way, but at least if we can save one child from this mess that they created, let's hope that we can get somebody saved from this mess. And we would like to get a good settlement out of this, but let's hope that we can also get some restitution of a better health for everybody. That's all I want to say.
God bless you, Joyce. And I have to tell you, that's why we spent so much of our time fighting in the federal court case. Because, while, yes, the $140 million outcome in that jurisdiction doesn't necessarily go to compensate any of the class members, but it directly goes at what Joyce just talked about. We are going to forever alter the trajectory of Millsboro, Delaware, by forcing this plant to change its practices and to no longer pollute the environment and to become environmentally responsible and a good corporate neighbor. So thank you, Joyce. You hit the nail on the head.
Frank Coomer, I believe you have a question. Frank,
Can you hear me?
yes, we can.
Okay. I'm sorry to go back over this, but I just wanted Gary to see if he could explain the timeline of when he received the bottled water and the hospitalization. I wasn't clear when the two of those events occurred. If they were far distant, one was before the other or after. So if you could just explain.
The internal gastrointestinal issues started sometime in September of 2017, and they have continued right up to date. Initially, my issue, beside the cramping and just being nauseated all the time, really went to diarrhea. I mean, just plain sick to your stomach, stuff that you knew damn good and well Pepto-Bismol wasn't going to help. And then we got down to Florida, and in November of this year, and my wife had to go in for emergency gallbladder surgery because she was literally doubled up with gastro issues, very similar to the same issues that I had last September and had my gallbladder out. Now that's a pretty strange coincidence. So hopefully that answers your question.
I think the question was, did you get the bottled water before you started suffering the symptoms, or was that after? You were
I can't hear him.
Were you already suffering symptoms when you got the bottled water from the company?
The diarrhea stopped, but the nausea, cramps, and a feeling of unwellness, if you will, continued. And
okay, thank you.
Culminating again in, having my gallbladder taken out because the gastrointernist didn't know what else to do.
Okay, thank you.
Right, Frank, just to answer your question there on the timeline, yeah, I mean, I think that Gary explained that he was hospitalized in the early fall, and the bottled water was not delivered to his house until I think it was the 1st, 2nd, 3rd of December.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Randall, I think you had a follow-up question.
Yes, thank you. Can you give us an idea of the size of the class in the state court settlement and the average payout per plaintiff after attorney fees and expenses?
Sure, Randall. So there are, in terms of the class overall, there's in excess of 7,000 potential class members. Many fewer of them have actually registered to participate in this settlement. The final numbers are still being tabulated, likely to be something in the range of 3,000 to 4,000 registrations. The next step in this process is to identify which of those registrations are actually on behalf of individuals who qualify as class members. Yet to be determined how many that will further reduce that number. So we don't have a total at this point in terms of the number of claims that will be made. In terms of averages, you could do the math, but it's frankly not that relevant because the next step in this process is called the allocation plan, by which a retired judge from the highest court in Maryland, Judge Irma Raker, will be working with a group called RG2 to assemble information on each of the registered claimants, assess their unique damages and circumstances, and then award an allocation from the funds in a manner that's proportionate with their own individual damages. So the outcome of that is that individuals who have been less affected by this will ultimately receive less money, and individuals who are more affected will receive more. And it's a process that we think will fair and appropriate compensation for the folks who have registered for this class action.
And Randall, just to follow up on that, not all the registrants are actually property owners. So as you might imagine, you have one property, you have a property owner, but you could have, a half a dozen or more people living there. So that the state case, the $65 million component is for personal injury and property damage, but the 3,000 to 4,000 are not all property owners. It's estimated that a third, maybe half, will share in the property portion of the settlement.
How many registered claimants are there now, ballpark?
Registered now?
3,000 to 4,000.
Yeah, it's between 3,000 and 4,000, probably closer to 4.
Okay. And what would be the aggregate amount of the settlement post fees and expenses?
Probably in the neighborhood of $45, $46 million.
Thank you.
Yes.
Unless there are any other questions, if anyone has anything, speak up. Nick, you have another question?
Yeah, just one technicality. I know this, I reported on this settlement a couple months ago. I'm just wondering what technical court proceeding has finalized it, what the announcement is today.
Yeah, so the announcement today is that the Superior Court, which is where the class action was pending, conducted a fairness hearing this morning. in which the court was presented with argument and proffers of evidence from plaintiff's counsel and made a ruling that the settlement was fair, reasonable, and adequate. So the state court officially entered an order and opinion today approving the settlement for $65 million. Separately, in the federal court, today, the federal court entered as an order of that court, and I think closing its case, the first amended consent decree, which covers the remediation and the upgrades to the facility. And that is the $140 million part of this settlement.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else have a question?
Looks like Frank has his hand up.
No, I think that's from his last question.
Okay.
Unless there is anyone else, really want to thank you all. Especially want to thank Gary Couples, David Neal, and Joyce Logan for joining us today. And want to thank you all for attending. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us, let us know. We'll do our best to get every piece of information you're looking for back to you. And with that, have a good day, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.